Have you ever been treated like the mistake of a family that lives on appearances? I have. My name is Clara Morgan, the daughter of Evelyn and Richard Morgan, respected names in Chicago social circles. To the outside, we were a traditional, wealthy, well-connected family. But on the inside, it was an empire of appearances sustained by mortgages, debts, and blind adoration for my brother Nathan, the misunderstood genius of failed startups. While I worked in a bookstore and lived simply, my parents bankrolled their eldest son's luxury. Whenever Nathan failed, someone covered for him. Whenever I succeeded, it was as if nothing had happened. Until one day, my mother showed up at my store, yes, that small, charming bookstore she always made a point of ignoring, with teary eyes and an expression that mixed panic and expectation. "Clara, honey, we need to talk about something important." Translation: they were in trouble. Serious trouble. I sat with her in the back room. She tried a gentle approach at first, the kind comes with an absurd request. "Your father and I are going through a rough patch. One of Nathan's businesses has gone bad again. We need you to lend us some money, just a little, until we get this sorted out." A little in this case was somewhere around $75,000. Oh sure. Pocket money. I calmly explained that that little was almost all I had, that money was earmarked for my rent, for my future. But she didn't want to hear it. "But what about Nathan's event? It's going to be at Norrai. Half of Chicago's elite will be there. If we don't make a worthy entrance, it will be the end of our reputation." Seriously. The woman was more concerned with a grand entrance at an event than with the foreclosure of her own house. I took a deep breath and said no. She stood up, her desperate expression changing to pure anger. "How can you be so selfish? After everything we've done for you." That was the last straw. I stood up too, but firmly. "What exactly did you do for me, Mom?" She froze. Literally. As if she was trying to search deep down in her soul for a legitimate memory of something relevant. But there was nothing. "Gave you a good home. Education. Education I paid for with student loans. The same loans you refused to co-sign because you were busy financing Nathan's third attempt at a delivery app." Her eyes widened. "That's not fair. Nathan has vision. He just needs support. And me? What do I have? Reality? Doesn't that count?" "You're cruel, Clara." "Cruel. Because I said no. For the first time in my life." "I'm sorry, Mom. Get out of my store. And please, don't ask me for money again." She slammed the door. Literally. Between whispered threats and insults. But in that moment, I was at peace. Because, for once, I was playing my game. That same night, the phone rang. It was my father. "Clara, we need to discuss this like adults. Your mother told me you were, let's say, useless today." "Dad, I can't give you my savings." "Listen here, young lady. This family has a reputation. We can't have the house foreclosed on. Do you know what that would do to Nathan's standing?" "Yes. Everything revolved around Nathan. Always. He just bought a Porsche, Dad. Maybe he can help." "That's different. That was an investment in his future. He needs to project success to achieve success. And me? Didn't my future matter? You work in a bookstore, Clara. Your future is already sort of set, isn't it? But Nathan, he has real potential." Those words. Real potential. If I had $1 for every time I heard that, I would have bought that Porsche myself. I sighed. "I'm sorry, Dad. I can't help." "Then you're not my daughter anymore." And the line went dead. I stood there, silent, staring at the city lights from my penthouse. Yes, penthouse, but they didn't know that. They thought I still lived in that cramped studio. And that was better. Because soon, they would find out exactly who the Morgan family's useless daughter was. And it wouldn't be over Sunday lunch. 2 weeks later, I received an unusual notification in my personal email. Bankruptcy petition hearing, case number 2847, Morgan Enterprises. I blinked, read it again, and smiled. Not because I was pleased by my family's ruin, but because the theater was finally over. What now? Now it was my turn to take the stage. To understand what had happened so far, I need to go back 3 years. When my grandmother Eleanor passed away, she left me everything. Her assets, her investments, her stocks, her real estate. Everything in my name. No one knew. She insisted on that. She only said one thing in her last letter to me. Those who underestimate you when they think you have nothing deserve to see you for who you are when you have everything. She always had a gift for dramatic phrases. The truth is that, in secret, I reshaped Grandma's empire. I renamed her holding company Uri Investments, a tribute to her maiden name, Uri. I started acquiring small assets, then larger assets. And one day I had the chance to buy debts. Lots of debts, including those of my own family. My parents' mortgage? Mine. My personal loans? That's right. My credit card debts, my business guarantees, and even the court debt from Nathan's visionary startup? Signed, sealed, and in my possession. But they didn't know that. Until the day of the hearing. I arrived early, discreetly. I wore a Chanel suit, understated but elegant, and tied my hair in a low bun. I sat in the back row of the courtroom, waiting for the right moment. Judge Willer entered promptly and began the proceedings. Case number 2847. Morgan Family Bankruptcy Petition. My parents stood up front, next to Nathan, all nervous but poised. The judge continued. I see the creditor's representative is present. Please identify yourself. That was my cue. I stood up calmly, my heels echoing in the silence of the courtroom. Yes, Your Honor. Clara Uri Morgan, representing Uri Investments. The effect was immediate. My mother turned away so quickly that she nearly dislocated her neck. My father turned pale, and Nathan dropped his cell phone on the floor. For the first time in his life, no one had any words. Clara, my mother whispered, as if my name were a curse. Good morning, Mom. Dad. Nathan. My father stood up suddenly, but the lawyer pulled him back, desperate. Mr. Morgan, keep order in the courtroom, the judge said, impassive. I continued. Your Honor, Uri Investments holds all of the Morgan family's outstanding debts, including the mortgage on their primary residence, business loans, and credit card debt. The total amount is approximately $12.7 million. Nathan shouted. That's impossible. Clara works in a bookstore. I smiled, with the calm that only 3 years of strategy can provide. Actually, I own the bookstore, and the building, and most of the block. I'm also the CEO of Uri Investments, formerly Eleanor Uri Enterprises. The buzz in the room was instantaneous. Everyone vaguely remembered the business legend Eleanor Uri, but no one knew that her granddaughter was the successor. And now, here I was with the documents in hand, ready for the final twist. Your Honor, I'm not here to demand immediate payment. I have a proposal. The silence in the room was absolute. The judge nodded. My parents were frozen. Nathan looked at me as if I had become a mirage. I took out a folder and opened the agreement. I am willing to restructure all outstanding debts under the following conditions. First, Nathan's financial privileges will be terminated immediately. He will need a real job. No startups. No imaginary investments. Nathan jumped out of his chair. You can't do that. I'm your brother. And you're a 33-year-old functioning adult who lives like a millionaire teenager with other people's money. Sit down, Nathan. The judge banged her gavel. Court order. I continued. Second, my parents must undergo financial counseling and supervise budget control. Third, they will sell the mansion and move to a more modest residence, which I have already purchased. My mother's face was covered in tears and her mascara was running. My father motionless. Perhaps, finally understanding that he had hit rock bottom. He tried to protest. You're our daughter. You can't treat us like this. I approached, looking him in the eye for the first time without fear. And you are my parents. But for 20 years you treated me like I was worthless. You mocked my work, dismissed my achievements, and threw all the resources at Nathan, as if I were invisible. The silence was more deafening than any scream. But there in that courtroom I was standing. Whole. And they, finally exposed. Do you remember that day you asked for my savings? I asked, looking directly at my parents. That $3,000 you thought I had saved in some random account? My mother shook her head, between sobs. We gave everything to you. No, Mom. You gave everything to Nathan, I answered firmly. Me? I built this all by myself. Or rather, with the help of the only person who believed in me from the beginning, Grandma Eleanor. The room was silent, as if even the walls were trying to absorb it all. She taught me that true character shows when people think you have nothing. And you showed me exactly who you are, under those conditions. Judge Willer studied the restructuring proposal carefully. After a few minutes, she looked up. The terms are fair. Considerably more generous than standard bankruptcy procedures. Will the Morgan family accept the proposed terms? My father's lawyer leaned forward and whispered something hurriedly. The truth was clear. There was no way out. Either they accepted, or they lost everything. My mother nodded silently. Nathan crossed his arms but said nothing. My father hesitated for a moment. Then finally he nodded, not looking at me. Excellent, I said, opening another folder. Here are the keys to the new house. A 3-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Park. We'll be moving in tomorrow morning. I turned to my brother. Oh, Nathan, the dealership has been notified. The sports car has been repossessed. In its place, we'll give you a used Toyota. Automatic. Economy. And with insurance paid for a month. After that, it's up to you. He huffed and looked at the floor in defeat. For the first time in his life, he had no control over anything. The next hour was a whirlwind of paperwork, signatures, oaths, and awkward silences. My parents didn't say a word to me. Not even a glance. But I could see everything in their attitude. Shame, anger, and maybe, just maybe, a hint of regret. Nathan stormed out as soon as he could. Probably to go after some account that had been frozen for weeks. I knew him too well. I finished signing the last of the papers and left the room. But before I could reach the door, I heard quick footsteps behind me. It was my mother. Her voice small, almost childish. Why did you let us fall so far before showing us the truth? I stopped. I turned around slowly. I took a deep breath. Because you needed to learn, she said calmly. Money isn't what makes a person valuable. Neither does appearance. Nor does social status. I wanted you to know what it's like to be judged by your bank account balance, not your character. She lowered her eyes. For the first time, she sounded human. What now? Will you forgive us? That's up to you, I replied. The house I bought is comfortable and safe. The new budget is reasonable. Not luxurious, but decent. What you do with this second chance is your choice. I walked to my car. It was no longer the old Honda Civic that my family used to look down on. It was a sleek, quiet Mercedes that I kept in storage. Still, I opened the door with the same calmness of someone who no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. But before I got in, I turned around one more time. Oh, Mum, remember that blue dress you wanted me to wear to Nathan's party? She nodded, confused. I bought the company that made it last year. They discontinued that model. It was hideous. The look on her face, it was the real closing of a chapter. 3 months had passed since that day in court. I still remember how I felt when I walked out of that room, like a ton had been lifted off my shoulders. I was no longer the rejected daughter, the invisible sister, the dead weight of the Morgan family. I was Clara Morgan, CEO of Uri Investments, owner of the bookstore where my story began, owner of my story. And life, for the first time, began to fall into place on this side as well. At the office, things were going swimmingly. I was leading new projects, investing in small, sustainable businesses and opening microcredit lines for women entrepreneurs, those who, like me, had been discredited by their own families. And at home? Well, the piece finally had an address. My parents moved to their new apartment in Lincoln Park, away from the mansion with Greek columns and closer to reality. And surprisingly, they were doing well. They kept to their budget, attended financial counseling sessions without protest, and what surprised me most, they started doing volunteer work. My mother, in the kitchen of a shelter. My father, teaching basic accounting classes to young people. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Nathan, on the other hand, was still trying to process the new world he was living in. He had gotten a job at a technology company. Not as a founder, nor as a manager, but as a support assistant. That's right. The startup genius was now answering calls and solving internet connection problems. He hated it, of course. But he was learning that not all work is a stage, not all achievements have a spotlight. And me? I was rediscovering silence. Discovering the pleasure of walking to the bookstore in the morning, opening the windows, smelling the books, and remembering when my grandmother would read to me, sitting on the floor, with a cup of tea in her hand and a look full of faith. She said that one day I would understand the power of the invisible. That the most valuable things don't always shine, but sustain. She was right. On my office desk, I put a new photo frame. An old, somewhat faded photo of me and Grandma Eleanor in front of her favorite bookstore, the same one that now bore my name. And behind the photo, the note from the last letter she left me. Sometimes people show their true selves only when they think you have nothing. But remember, Clara, true power is not in possessing, but in choosing when to reveal. That note was my daily reminder that even when everything seems to be falling apart, we can still build. Even when we lack love, we can sow respect. And even when the pain comes from our own family, it is still possible to create a new path. Our own. Without asking for permission. Without needing permission. Just with courage and a little memory. There are days when I still wake up with the feeling that I'm living a story that isn't mine. As if everything had been taken from a book that someone had forgotten on a shelf, and I, by chance, had opened it to the right pages. But then I remember. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a choice. I chose not to fight back by shouting. I chose strategic silence. I chose not to ask for acceptance. I chose respect. I chose not to hide anymore. I chose to exist completely, with everything they told me I wasn't, and with everything I learned to be. People think that power has to do with money, with status, with visible victories. But true power is knowing how to wait for the right time to get up. It's having the chance to crush and choose to rebuild. It's having the opportunity to say I won, but preferring to say, let's start over. I could have let my family lose everything. I could have watched from the best seats the bankruptcy of those who belittled me for years. But that's not what my grandmother taught me. She taught me to win without stepping on anything, to get up without shouting, to start over without having to prove anything to anyone. Nathan still doesn't talk to me. And maybe it will be a while. Or maybe it will never happen. My father still looks at me with a mix of wounded pride and sincere shame. My mother, well, she sent me a letter the other day. Handwritten. Short, direct, almost cold as always, but with a sentence that made my heart tremble. You won in your own way. Maybe it's time for us to learn from you. Maybe. Maybe they'll change. Maybe they won't. But I've changed. And that's enough. Today, I walk lightly. I go into the bookstore, drink my coffee, talk to clients, sign contracts, launch new projects, all with the clear conscience of someone who didn't have to shout to be heard. Of someone who built something great in silence. Because if there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's that freedom isn't in running away from pain, but in transforming it. And power? It's in knowing that even when the world calls us invisible, we can still change the ending of the story. My name is Clara Morgan. And that was my turning point.